Mikhail Gorbachev, one of the largest and most influential figures of the second half of the 20th century. The eighth and final leader of the Soviet Union has died today, aged 91, after a long illness. Gorbachev became leader of the USSR at just 54 years of age back in 1985 and set about a series of reforms which inevitably saw the bloc crumble and put an end to the Cold War. Loathed in his native Russia, Gorbachev was lauded around the world, and global leaders from every corner have paid tribute to the last Soviet president. Joining me now, as they do every Wednesday on Credlin, is Peter's brilliant international panel, former Labor MP Michael Danby and former Liberal Senator and Sky News host Corey Bernardi. Gentlemen, welcome. Michael, to you
Evening,
first,
Chris
if
and
I
Corey.
may. Good to have you on. Gorbachev was a looming figure of history. What are your reflections on his legacy, the end of the Cold War?
Well, we have to thank Ronald Reagan, the great Pope John Paul the Great, Margaret Thatcher and Mikhail Gorbachev, above all, for the end of the curse of communism. Tens of millions of people died in the Gulag in Russia. Even people, well, especially people who love Russian and Russian culture, have to thank Mikhail Gorbachev for putting an end to that curse. He was the kind of person who Margaret Thatcher said we could do business with. Unfortunately, we don't have that situation now in Russia.
Yeah, Corey, that was my next point. His ascension to the leadership of the Soviet Union in the 80s was really the start of the turning point of the Cold War. Margaret Thatcher did say she could do business with him. He had a bond with Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush. Gee, how we could do with the leader of his ilk in Moscow right now?
Well, I think we could, Chris, because in the end, Gorbachev did oversee the fall of Soviet communism. I have a view that it wasn't intentional, quite frankly. I think it was a bit more mismanagement than anything else. He was a great fan of Lenin, and he tried to get economic reforms before, and democratic reforms, if I can put it like that, before the economy was ready for it, and that resulted in a fall. But he did engage with the West, and that was a huge change from any previous Soviet leader. Yeah. And for that, we should remember him fondly because he left a giant footprint on the world.
To the Indo-Pacific now, and the Solomon Islands has imposed a temporary ban, they say, on naval visits by US ships amid heightened tensions between the two countries. Michael, how big a concern is this? The Solomons seem to be moving further and further away from their Western allies and acting like some kind of secretive Chinese province.
It was rude not to tell the Americans for a week. It's confrontationist. It shows how far they're willing to go because it's against their own self-interest. That was a fishing ship monitoring fishing around the Solomons. That's one of their only big industries. Are Australian ships also being barred? I urge you and all your readers to just go to Google and have a look at all the big land battles and naval battles that were fought around there. This is what the Chinese are trying to do, the same as the Japanese, but they only have to buy the Solomon Islands Parliament, $35,000 for 32 MPs. They don't have to do a military campaign through the whole of East Asia. It's terribly cheap for the Chinese communists, and it's a terrible worry for Australia. Lots of work for Penny Wong to do up there.
But does that rekindle the relationship, Corey? Because she's been there, Albo's been there, Sogavari's there cuddling Albo like a long-lost friend. It doesn't seem to work.
No, it doesn't seem to work because, unfortunately, they're for rent. And the only way you're going to replace the Chinese is with a higher bid. I mean, if you want to buy a country, you want to buy a government, or rent it, I should say, the Solomon Islands is the place to do it. It's appalling, quite frankly, and I think Australia should be very concerned.
We should be concerned about what's just happened in Israel, Michael. A former Gaza chief for World Vision has been sentenced to 6 years behind bars by an Israeli court. You've been following this story. This must surely have the potential to trigger further trouble.
Oh, I don't think so. There are many terrorist cases there, and this bloke has been before their legal system, which is just like ours. Sometimes they have security hearings that sort of are private, but I don't think that Australian taxpayers want their money being spent via World Vision on a bloke who funnels the money out to Hamas, which Australia officially declares as a terrorist organisation. Yeah. It's a just result, in my view, and it'll stop people who are working in Gaza from taking humanitarian money for the wrong purposes.
Corey, we've just seen a spike in popularity for bumbling, stumbling Joe Biden, and also a spike in popularity for Donald Trump. Just going back onto Joe Biden, is that due to his political skill, a lack of opposition, or a blip in polling, do you think?
Oh, I think maybe a collective madness has got to the pollsters. I can't see how anyone could be wanting to see Joe Biden is doing a great job in America. It's just extraordinary. These polls have to be wrong. I'm not saying that Donald Trump's polls are right either, but Biden's, I mean, look, maybe it's a dead cat bounce from, the lowest polls in history.
Yes, I agree. And Michael, after the raid on Mar-a-Lago, we all tipped it. He's a victim again, and they surge in their numbers to support him, Donald Trump.
Well, how about you think that some people in the Biden administration were Machiavellian enough to do this rather than a subpoena, as Professor Alan Dershowitz said they should have done if they had some lost documents. How about this puts Donald Trump back at the centre of American politics and helps the Democrats by making things an either-or case of Donald Trump, as we saw at the last elections. That didn't go too well. Puts DeSantis and other moderate Republicans out of business. Very Machiavellian. I want to see the real reasons why this raid was called on the president's house, why they went through Melania's underwear, and why normal documents which a president has have to be seized in a raid rather than subpoenaed.
Yeah, exactly. Quickly to you, Corey. Cameron Smith going to Greg Norman's Saudi-backed Live Golf Circus. You'd do it for $150 million too, wouldn't you?
I'd do it for about a third of that, Chris. And I reckon you would too, and Michael would as well.
What kind of a golfer is he, Chris?
Oh,
what kind of a golfer is he?
It doesn't matter. He'll retire at the ripe old age of 30.